Welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show with Mike Midgley.
Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic Podcast. On today's episode, I'm excited to be covering an amazing topic for all small form entrepreneurs and marketing in the early stages of a company. Today's influencer is Mirho, the co-founder of Moss Generation, and Max is based out of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. Welcome to the show, Max. It's great to have you today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And how's the weather out there today? I just spoke to somebody in Utah earlier, which I know was a little bit over, but he said it was really hot and sticky out there.
Yeah, I was in LA recently, and it was just like LA was better than Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a little too hot right now. I'm not enjoying it.
Okay, no worries. Well, I say thanks for jumping on. And, as you know, the regular listeners of the show, I always sort of give a backdrop or a back view of my view of the sort of specialist subjects that the influencers put on. And, for many of us, the fear of taking the leap into entrepreneurship can be reasonably daunting. Whether you're leaving a well-paid job and the security that brings, you're keeping a roof over your head or anything like that. Maybe you're just leaving college and or university and, you're starting out on your own. And the thoughts of competing with more established brands out there, wow, it makes a lot of us, I remember when I first started, I thought, am I doing the right thing? Should I run for the hills? Should I do a U-turn and back up and go back in there? So it's not uncommon, your family circle, your friends, your social peers, they're all going to say, hey, are you guys crazy? You're making the biggest mistake of your life. But entrepreneurship has a lot of rewards as well if you get it right and start off on the right footing. I remember, for the last 25 years, I've had the pleasure of living the entrepreneurial life, and I've got to be honest with you, it ain't all roses. There's highs, there's lows. It's 1 minute you're hiking through the clouds and everything's going right. The next thing you're sliding down the hillside on your backside, getting your knees grazed out, and it can be a bit of a turbulent, journey. So you may be sat there asking, is all this worth it? Well, there's so many gurus talk about the success of being an entrepreneur, but it can be a rocky path, as I said. And I interview, weekly entrepreneurs from all around the world, and I've yet to come across one where they've just made it. They've all either failed spectacularly or they've hit walls, dead ends, cul-de-sacs, made a lot, lost a lot, or lost it before they've even made it. And usually they fail or learn many, many times. So I cover how can you actually get started on the right path, improve your chances that provide confidence to make that leap. Well, Max is going to share some tips and his own journey, to sort of get you going. If you're at that stage, do I turn right, do I turn left? And if we can help you avoid, a few rocky paths, and that's a job well done. So it's going to be a super, super lesson. Before we get into Max's bio, let's just talk about how you can connect with Max. You can pick him up on his website at mossgeneration.com. That's MOSS and then generation.com. You can also get him on Twitter at Entrepreneur, which is ENTREPRE, as in entrepreneur, and then _nerd. You can also get him on LinkedIn, which is Max's favorite channel, which is linkedin.com/IN/Max Mirho. And that's MAXMIRHO. Now, for you guys listening on the apps, if you head over to blog.thesuccessof.io, the blog podcast where you can watch the video I'm recording with Max here as well. We'll put all the show links here. They'll also be in the apps as well, so you can connect with Max. So don't worry about writing it down or pulling over. We'll get it sorted. So let's talk about you, Max, a little bit. I know you're doing, what you say your best to have an impact on entrepreneurial education by teaching others how to start in a company, function at a smaller level, live through videos, web series, and obviously we use the hashtag The Entrepreneur, which I think is absolutely awesome, mate. So congrats for your progress so far. Tell us a little bit about how that sort of came around.
Yeah, totally. So when it comes to Entrepreneur, I'm glad you like the hashtag. I think it's
awesome.
It's a great piece of branding. I think people appreciate it a lot. I'm trying to get
you get it merchandised.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm getting a trademark on it right now. It's funny. So I got started with Entrepreneur because I was messing around with LinkedIn content. I was having a lot of fun with that, and I was in this stage where I was trying all these different things. And I was while I was in college. I think my junior year, end of my junior year, I was fascinated with little projects, entrepreneurial kind of ventures, nothing big, nothing like a startup. But I was trying to make an impact in my college, in my university, in Pittsburgh, in my city. anything that I could find that was interesting, or could I could make a little business out of, or could give me flexibility. And I got hooked on producing LinkedIn content because I found like it was easier to build a bit of an audience there, because like Instagram is super saturated, Facebook is super saturated, YouTube is super saturated, but LinkedIn was just starting to be more aggressive as a content platform. I hopped on there, and I started to get really, really quickly annoyed with the type of entrepreneurial content around there, content about entrepreneurship, because most of it out there is kind of like what you were saying by these gurus, like the Tai Lopez, the what's his name, Gary Vee. Like there's a lot of these people out there, and it frustrates me. And they know what they're talking about to some degree. Like they are successful entrepreneurs and they're kicking butt. Like especially Gary Vee. Like he's an amazing entrepreneur. But the type of content they put out is essentially just motivation and inspiration. And that's not what I needed as like an aspiring entrepreneur. Like when I was trying to build stuff, that's not what I needed. I had plenty of motivation. I had plenty of oomph behind me, right? I knew I wanted to do something, and I was willing to stay up late or work super hard or whatever it was. But I didn't know how to get started. I didn't really know how entrepreneurship functions. So I started going out, interviewing entrepreneurs as much as I possibly could, and I kind of shared some of that from some of what I learned on LinkedIn, and people really liked it. And so I've been continuing with that, just trying to provide informational content as opposed to inspirational and motivational content, which is 99% of what's out there when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. And for you guys listening on the show, you classify what Max has said there, it's really wise words. There's too many people out there, fist pumping and yeehawing and sharing everything out there. And, like I say, there's absolutely no doubt that, the majority of the people out there have got best intentions. Sure, they've got a monetization situation with the content. Maybe they've promoted a book, they've got a course, they've got an agency. It doesn't really matter. We've all got commercial interests at some heart. So I have no issue with that. But what Max is actually saying is, when you're getting started out there, that inspiration, it's not what you need. It's the how. It's how do I execute on this? And that's a really valid point. Just talk to me a little bit more about the frustrations, Max. You said you were frustrated. It's not what you needed. For the people who are in a similar situation, maybe just where you were at that point, how frustrating is it? What did you do about it? And you mentioned you started to study some people. Is there a strategy around that? I'm not saying did you have like a checklist that you like put and organize anything, as organized as that, but just for somebody who's getting started, let's practice what we preach. How would they go about doing that? Follow somebody and then what?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the way that I got started learning, the reason was because I was in college, and college is great. Like I went to Carnegie Mellon University, awesome university, wonderful time. They have a great entrepreneurial program for undergrads too. Even in that, for the first 2 years of my school, I was doing basic business courses, right? And I wasn't learning what I wanted to learn in terms of entrepreneurship. And even when I got to the entrepreneurial classes, they gave me the rundown, but I didn't understand how that worked in real applications, right? So it was kind of like a simulation. But they do really well, but it wasn't like what I felt like was enough. So I went out, and when I interviewed entrepreneurs, I essentially, as a student, using my student email, everybody loves a student email. I said, hey, I'm Max. I know essentially Jack, and I would love to hear your experience as an entrepreneur. And when I sat down with them, people were surprisingly open to it. When I sat down with them, I essentially asked all the questions that you think are important as a beginning entrepreneur. It's like, how did you know your idea was the right idea, right? And how did you like that was essentially my starting question, because I had no understanding of how that worked. And then I realized it's about okay, it's not about having a cool idea. It's about finding a problem in an industry. Yeah. It's not about and the way that you get to that isn't by knowing something really well. It's about interviewing people in that industry and narrowing things down. There was this whole customer discovery process that I had no earthly understanding existed. And none of that is described anywhere. And that's what I'm frustrated with. Because when you listen to Gary Vee, when you listen to anybody that's preaching entrepreneurship, and it really is preaching, it's such a buzzword. It's so overused now, and nobody talks about the actual process of going out, interviewing customers, asking the right questions, and screwing your idea. Your idea doesn't probably means absolute nothing. I have a series actually that I'm trying to start to break that down. It's called #StartupIdeasSuck. Just because like they do, like it's fun. There's an entrepreneurial spirit in all of us. Everybody, even if you're in college, even if you have no understanding of entrepreneurship, everybody gets together sometimes, and it's like a pastime to get with your friends and discuss like, oh, I have a great startup idea. Do you think this would work, guys? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a thing that almost everybody does.
A dozen times, yeah, all the time.
Exactly.
Mike, can you pitch into this? Can you give us a feedback on it? You get it all.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, oh, I have like the next Uber for dogs or whatever the heck it is, right?
Yeah.
And everybody loves coming up with these startup ideas because we all have, at least most of us have like this inner like entrepreneurial passion, like we want to build something, right? But the idea means absolutely nothing, and there's this weird stigma around having an idea, like, oh, you shouldn't share that idea. Like if somebody steals your idea, they could go off and make millions. Like that idea is your check to success, right? And that is absolutely not true. There's nothing around that. Even with like successful entrepreneurs, they will ask like, "Oh, you need to get a patent on that right now. Why are you discussing that right now?" Or like, "I'm gonna have to ask you to sign an NDA." I've been asked to sign an NDA a bunch of times because people are like, "I want some advice on my startup, but you can't have you telling it to other people." It's super frustrating, and there's no realism in that kind of conversation around.
That's the word, realism. Absolutely.
Exactly. So it's just there needs to. Any sort of understanding of how it actually functions, how to get started, especially with the customer discovery, because that is the first step to building a company. Even if it's a service business, even if it's not like a product focused venture backed startup, people need to stop thinking about investment. If you can monetize and bootstrap, that is the way that you start a company 99% of the time.
Yep.
There's massive misconceptions about how it all functions. And that's because of all this content on the internet. So
yeah, and it's great on one hand because we've never been able to access as much or as wide a variety of content. But
absolutely.
Cutting through it to the actual real deal of where you're at, because everybody and anybody is on a journey. It doesn't matter where you're at. I recently wrote a blog post which is called The Continuous Loop to Success. You'll hear this all the time, Max, where people say, hey, success is not a journey from A to Z. It's a zigzag line that goes like that. Well, actually, I don't even think it's that, because it doesn't matter where you're at. If you look at where you're in your journey, where the listeners are in the journey, where, Gary Vee's in his journey or anybody else, imagine like an Olympic running track. We've all been around the sports track, it's 8 lanes or 10 lanes or whatever it is, and then you go around 400 meters. Now, for somebody getting out, they may just be coming off the block and going, and then guess what? You start and you bank hard around this corner, don't you? And that makes it difficult. And then by the time you've figured that corner out, you're on the back straight, you get a bit of traction, then guess what? You're back into another corner. So, and then if you look at the stages from seed or idea to startup to growth to progressive to maturity, established, expansion, growth, maturity, whatever stage you're at, you always find yourself where you're having to hit the reset button and go again, because you're maybe trying to get from 0 to $1 million or $1 million to 100 million or whatever it might be. So ultimately, it just keeps resetting. And those journeys are so important. And like you say, I love the idea. And it'd be great if you could categorize those contents for each stage of the businesses. So
I agree completely.
I understand it. And, I didn't have as much confusion. I started my entrepreneurial career. Well, I actually had a flirt with it at 21, but goofed up to 1994. So 25 years pre-real internet, or commercialization of internet. So I didn't get a lot of that. It was the old ticket to the library and going and getting the books and reading them and getting stuck in the old-fashioned way. We didn't even really have email at that point. But I get it. I understand it. And boy, I can imagine his frustration. So, what's the story about that? They're just dialing down, getting interviewed into that sort of market fit, understanding those interviews, and then sort of, getting it organized and putting it into some type of plan. I'm assuming that's what you did next. Is that correct?
Yeah, so essentially, like, first I just caught kind of a huge networking bug, and I was really interested in just talking to CEOs of little companies, startups, entrepreneurs, anything along those lines, because I wanted to learn more and I wanted to build my network, because I kept hearing that, like, having a network is important, and I didn't realize how important it was until later. But I essentially just asked the same questions, and after I would ask a question, like, my first question was like, how did you know your idea was a good idea? And then the next question that I had, like, the next 3 questions I had were the same. And then after that I was like, okay, so how did you find your customer, right? And I started to, like, that was my next question for like the next 5 interviews. And after that it was like, okay, so how did you understand that this is an issue in the industry? What kind of conversations did you have with customers prior to building the business? And I just, like, started to iterate and started to understand more.
You just layered it, information on top of information.
Exactly. So anytime that I didn't know something, I would ask the next entrepreneur that I interviewed that question. So, and I would just keep coming up with questions.
Nice.
So yeah, no, that was it wasn't kind of a formal plan. And if you're trying to learn something, like, school is awesome, online stuff is awesome. Even with my content, you're not going to get everything that you need. And I highly suggest, it doesn't matter if you're somebody who's been in business for 40 years or if you're a student that's 18 just going into college. Like, the biggest thing that you can do is email people in the industry that you want to get to know and say, hey, can I hop on a 30-minute call with you, a 20-minute call with you, and ask you a couple questions? Or can we get coffee and sit down? I am unbelievably curious. I promise I won't waste your time. I just want to understand some things because I haven't been able to find the information elsewhere. People are surprisingly open to it, especially if you're a student, but I think you can manage it anytime.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about building the network and the importance of having your network. Now, network of connections to people, getting out there, like you say, you've got the networking bug, you're out there meeting people. And tell me, I suppose that's a little bit about, nice segue, Max is the co-founder of Mosh Generation. It's an ecosystem, an aggregator for investable tech startups in Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. His goal with his company is to centralize the city's entrepreneurial community and provide like a deal flow or a conveyor belt to outside investment organizations. So I know we had a chat previously, Max, about this, and I was so impressed about that, the way you've approached that and how you've got a very wise head on a young set of shoulders, if you don't mind me saying, and I mean that with respect, not in.
No, totally.
And for you to go into that, because that can be a bit of a shark pitch. But tell the investor side and the VC side and things like that, and unrealistic pitch decks or whatever it may be. So tell me a little bit about the co-founding of Mosh Generation, how that came about, and what you do there.
Totally. Yeah. So I was during my junior year at CMU, I was really interested in entrepreneurship. I was essentially trying out everything that I possibly could, right? And I was actively trying to build my network, and I had done so for about like 6 or 7 months, and I was really aggressive. So and Pittsburgh is small, so I knew most of the people in town that were the typical figures in the startup ecosystem, right? That was a lot to be able to say as a student, because there were a lot of entrepreneurs in town. You go to some of the accelerators in town and you get kind of plugged in. But as a student, I was doing pretty well because I was individually meeting people. People knew who I was, and so I was trying really hard. And so my network was decent. I was able to pitch that to a student in residence program that was just kind of starting at CMU for a venture capital group. Learned how they wanted to get into the city, how that all functioned, and I got some experience with VC and how deal flow works. That was really exciting. At some point, towards the end of that, I was kind of recruited by my friend Andy because he was running. He started this little group where he just got some entrepreneur friends together. They had a bunch of fun, got some drinks, and he ended up getting it sponsored by some local corporate people that he was friends with, and they were like, "We love this group. We want to let's get everybody free drinks and free food." And he was like, "That sounds great." And so he made that event. It was a little bit bigger than he anticipated. He knew he wanted to keep it up, and he knew that I was running some events in town just as some of my experiments. And he was like, "You're kick butt at this. You should come on and help me." And so we co-founded the group together, and we actually just founded the group as an LLC recently.
Oh,
but we've been
congratulations!
Yeah, that's super exciting. But we've been running it for about 1.5 years. But the goal was essentially, the reason he started the group was that Pittsburgh is super fragmented. There are accelerators, incubators, co-working spaces in town where a lot of these startups, like these product startups, hide and they do their thing. But they don't have time to talk to each other because you're spending all your goddamn time building a product. And then second, like the events in town are very attendance focused and not attendee focused.
Yeah.
So they'll invite everybody and they'll brand it as an entrepreneur event, but they'll invite, and so like 95% of the people that show up are service providers or real estate agents or consultants or people trying to sell their services or talk to startups as clients, right? And so when, as me as a student, I was never able to meet any entrepreneurs through events, maybe 1 or 2, and it was usually the same people. And when you're an entrepreneur, that's even worse because talking to other founders can be helpful. You're dealing with the same issues. If you're interacting with even a remotely similar customer, or you have like the same kind of customer set, that's unbelievably helpful for introductions. It's helpful for investor introductions. There's so many things that like having a network as a founder of other founders is helpful for. You can't find that in Pittsburgh. because there's no avenue to do that, because all of it is just crap, and it's fluff, and it's really annoying. And so he just essentially got everybody together, only invited founders of tech startups, and occasionally people that are really big ecosystem connectors, right? So there's some people that like work in accelerators and they're really, really close with everybody. They're a good fit too. But beyond that, I just invited those groups. We've been expanding really, really rapidly. We started at like 30 people, and then now we're at around 167. And it's doing really well. Yeah, and I feel like we've only gotten like half of the ecosystem. But the goal is just to get founders connected to founders. Yeah. And I realized that if we can do that and we have all the founders, I have enough VC experience that I can be like a student in residence essentially for any VC, because I have access to all the founders already. So that's the idea. That's what we're trying.
That's where the aggregator comes in to sort of connect and place, and then it's a win-win situation, isn't it? The startups are getting it, the VCs are getting it. It's a more targeted pitch. It's you're avoiding those irrelevant pitches where tech companies are pitching VCs who are investing in farming and agriculture and and things like that. Which is you see it all the time where it's just a couple of my friends who work in the equity markets and the VC markets, they say, Mike, the amount of pitches that we get which are just not relevant to our fund or, whatever it would be. And this shows it's so bad. And he says, I wouldn't invest in them even if it was a good idea because, they've not done the research. And, it's not different, especially with the tools available, tech startup, VC, bioscience, whatever it would be, SaaS, MarTech, whatever. A little bit of work to find and getting a more targeted approach is there. So I get it and I understand it. So just a quick one, plans for it. You mentioned, you've just scratched the surface with it. Are you looking to get that up to, either a bigger attendance in a bigger venue, or are you looking to maybe split it into 2 sessions over the month, to keep it at a similar size? What's the plans looking like over the next 12 months for that, Max?
Yeah, so we do monthly events. That's been the plan. We've been off of that because sponsorship is hard to keep consistent, and it's a pain in the butt. So we're figuring that all out. But usually monthly events, get everybody together. We had one last month, super fun, loved it. Trying to keep up with that. And then my job, because Andy, my co-founder, he runs his own startup. He's got his own hardware tech startup, and he's been keeping up with that. So that's most of his thing, and Mosh Generation is mostly my thing. He handles the sponsorship side, and I handle most of everything else. My plan is to expand the group to hopefully around I want to get a little bit, I feel like just given what I've seen in Pittsburgh, there's probably over 300, probably more towards 350 startups. It's just really hard to find them all. And that's a solid size given the size of the city, but I want to capture all of them. And the next 12 months, I want to get as many of them as possible.
So we have a big listenership in the States. So if people are wanting to sponsor an event like this in Pittsburgh, who would be an ideal sponsor for you? For that, if you could pick your perfect sponsorship out for the event, who would that be?
Yeah, so mostly we've been doing corporates. We recently got a group in town called Work Hard Pittsburgh, really, really supportive of freelance, of things like that, and they're supportive of startups because they're embedded in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and they're helpful for providing services that startups can't do. That was an awesome sponsor because they're already embedded in they're aimed towards startups, right?
You understand it already.
Exactly, so that was great for us. The ideal, though, would be like a super established startup, like a let's say a mini Salesforce, right? Like a Salesforce is an example of a really successful startup that went really far. We don't have Salesforces like that in anything like that in Pittsburgh. We have a company called Duolingo. They're very, very popular. They're popular around the world. They help people learn new languages. They're the #1 success story in Pittsburgh in terms of startups. And if we could get somebody like them or another big startup in town that's made it essentially, quote unquote, nobody's made it, but as close as you can get. And if they have the resources to do something like that, that would be super ideal, because I think connecting with that network is helpful to anybody in any stage of the entrepreneurial company.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you listen to this and you're interested in getting involved, you can connect with Max. Just connect on LinkedIn, which is linkedin.com/in/Max Mirho, and that's MAXMIRHO. Leave me a comment below. I can get you connected with Max if you want a personalized introduction on that side as well. So that's awesome, Mike. And the background, and congratulations on your journey so far, because like you say, you could have given up, you could have got frustrated, you could have gone out and said, hey, this is just not working, fallen at the first sort of fence. But true entrepreneurial style resilience comes in, and you find a way, you go under it, over it, round it, through it, whatever whatever it takes to get through the wall. And congratulations, and I'm sure you've got many more successes to come. So appreciate you sharing the backdrop with it. And we talked earlier about the subject being small form entrepreneurship and marketing in the early stages of a company. So let's just talk a little bit more around that. And, from what you're seeing, from what you're experiencing, in your mind, what is the fundamental issues? And, how is entrepreneurial education lacking? I know we touched on that clarity, that confusion, frustration, but let's just go a little bit deeper on that and just open that up a little bit. So, how is entrepreneurial education lacking, in your view, Max?
Yeah, totally. So, like I said a little bit before, like it's the process for building a company and the process for coming up with a product, even if it's like a lifestyle business, it doesn't have to be a big fancy venture-backed startup. Just creating any sort of business, the first thing is the customers, right? Like if you don't have a customer, you don't have a business. That's where all your revenue comes from. People need to be paying you for something, whether that's a service, whether that's a product, whether that's like information or whatever it is. People need to pay you for something. And so you need to figure out what people are missing. It needs to be a pain point. And in order to find a pain point, you go interview people in an industry and say, hey, what are your issues? Where do your costs come from? Where does your revenue come from? Like understand the whole process. I'm interviewing thrift stores right now as a part of my entrepreneur thing where I do streams about like doing customer investigation, customer discovery into different industries. What I've noticed is thrift stores are all over the freaking place. They're a very, very basic form of business and there's tons of industry problems. And I need to interview more people, but if I find a small problem, even if it's like, okay, tagging our clothes is really annoying, right? Like our current process for tagging takes a lot of time and it wastes a lot of our employees' time where they could be sorting donations or something like that. If that turns out to be an issue, then you see that across different thrift stores. If I go and I talk to 20 thrift stores and like 19 of them all have issues tagging their clothes, then that's something I can make. They'll pay for that because that'll save them time and that'll save them money in the long term. So me charging $50 for a tagger that I've like retrofitted to help them specifically with their problems, that's a product that I can sell to them, right? I think the best way to teach this kind of thing is through examples. Because that was what helped me the most. Like that's why I talked to all these entrepreneurs, because I would use them as an example base. If you can go out and you can do a case study, that's wonderful. But a case study, it treats it like it's the only way things work. And the best way that I think is to flood your brain with like probably like 100 different examples of successful entrepreneurship, even if it's small form, even if it's like whatever form. It doesn't have to be in any specific area, but they should all have the theme of the customer discovery and how you found that problem, right? Whether you were in an industry, you saw the issue yourself, you fixed it, or you had no clue what was going on, you interviewed people, you fixed it. Like that's what's helped me. That's helped me understand the process of customer discovery. I have tons of examples in my head that I read off to people all the times to give them context about how that functions, especially with relation to the kind of industry they're in. Like B2B functions completely different from B2C.
Of course.
And so having examples like that to read off or just to listen to and flood your kind of brain helps you get creative and helps you understand how you get started. I think that's what's missing, and people just don't use examples like that. I don't know why.
Yeah. It's crazy. And, even if you go back, well, probably more than 20, 30, 40 years anyway, but, the old-fashioned, customer focus group is what it used to be called, where you get a group of customers in, get them in a session, and just you're literally going through a structured question and an example situation. And big brand products, small brand products, maybe the smaller ones didn't do it as much because of budget restrictions. They just have to get a market. But the bigger brands, and they used to do that all the time. And from washing powder, all the way through to car adverts and, everything in between. But it seems as the internet has gone, it's just a quick Google search, or I think it's this, or I see a lot of misconceptions. We're going to talk about those in a moment, but it's like, oh, well, we're the best at what we do. Well, if you were the best at what you do, you wouldn't be at that size, you know what I mean? And it's not like our ambition, that's holding you back, buddy, you know what I mean? There's a bit of an ego there, or a bit of misunderstanding of what really needs to be done. But it's not about being disrespectful to people. People can believe what they want, but ultimately, it's great advice. Get inside, get under the fingernails of your customers and your prospective customers, find those problems out, and start a movie product or your solution that way. We talked about misconceptions, Max. You talk about and say there's a lot of misconceptions around. So what do you see as the biggest misconception people should be aware of when starting a company?
Biggest misconceptions, I think the one that's publicized the most, and I think that's solid, is that like getting
Yeah.
investment for your company is so rare. It is not the first thing you need to be thinking about whatsoever. It is the last thing you need to be thinking about. Like by far, like it shouldn't even be like a concept. Like if you are along your journey and you are plugging along and you're building your company and you have it established to the point where like things are happening, you have customers, you have traction, then maybe you think about investment. If for some reason you want to go on some crazy growth path or you have like competitors closing in and you need to get a boost, like there are very, very hyper specific scenarios where investment from an angel, from venture capital, especially from whatever is applicable, right? And you're probably going to like ask for a little bit of money from friends and family. That's not investment. That's just kind of a thing. And you may not even do that. Like a service business, I'm like if you start an agency, like a digital marketing agency, that's a company. You can start you build revenue immediately in that. You don't need investment in that. Nobody would. It's a service business, so it doesn't function like that. People need to stop thinking about investment. I have had people come to me with ideas and say, I need like 4 million in order to get this off the ground, and I'm like, cool. Like you have an idea, you've built half an app, and you have no understanding of whether or not customers like that. Nobody's going to invest in that. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. How do you deal with that letdown? Because I've always found it just to be directly honest with people, and because otherwise, they pick out words what they want to hear, and that's like,
yes, confirmation.
But sometimes it's saying, look, I respect you, I appreciate what you've done, but I need to be honest with you. If you take anything away from this conversation, write this part down, and that's get a working product, learn your audience, get a whatever the reason is, or whether they've missed the point, whatever it would be. But I've never. It's because you see their excitement drain out of the face. And sometimes you even hear them, he doesn't believe in the product, we'll go get somebody else. And they don't listen. What do you see, Max? Do you see a similar thing in Pittsburgh that I see when I work with people who are looking at investment?
So yeah, I think you echoed a good amount of what I see. So it wasn't in Pittsburgh, but I was recently contacted by a fellow out in Silicon Valley via a friend, and he was looking for investment. And my friend knew that I knew a lot of investors in town in Pittsburgh because I run Mouse Generation, and so she was like, "Hey, I would really appreciate if you gave this guy some help. He's looking for investment. He's got a cool thing going." I'm like, "Sure." I'm a little skeptical, but let's go for it. Hopped on a call with him. Actually, I didn't hop on a call with him. I just messaged him over Facebook, and he explained that he sent me a slide deck. He wanted me to sign an NDA, and I'm like, dude, if I'm going to even be remotely helping you find investors, I can't sign an NDA because I need to discuss everything that it is with your business. Like, I need to be able to completely describe everything completely fluently. He's like, fine, send me the thing. I read over it. He has a new fancy idea for a dating app. He has built half the app. They're in closed alpha. Like it's very, very early stage, and he's asking for $4 to $8 million. Yeah. I said, I essentially said the same thing that you said. I said, dude, nobody's going to invest in that. Not because it's a bad idea, just because they have no understanding of whether that's going to be a successful business. There are tons and tons of dating apps out there right now. What is the reason that they have advantage? Exactly. What's the one thing? A lot of them have ridiculous marketing budgets behind them. That's going to be really hard to penetrate. If you are new, it's not just going to be make it and they come. That's not how it works. So what I would recommend for you is if you're looking for investment, release the app, let people play with it, get as many users as you possibly can. If you get traction on that side and people start to switch from other apps, then you have a real pitch story. Then you have something that you can actually pitch to investors and you say, I have traction on this. People like this. And all I need is a nice marketing budget to compete on some level with some of these older ones, some of these like Tinders or Bumbles or whatever they are, right? So essentially the same advice that you're saying. It's just you saying no, that's a bad idea, or no, I can't help you find investment, and shutting people down kind of on that front. It does drain the happiness from that. People get so, because you're so attached to that idea, and I've been there too. But so the best thing that you can do is say, this is awesome. This is what you need more of, right? You need a little bit more of this, and keep, because they have the drive, they have the motivation. They just need a little bit more of that information, right? And that's one of the big things missing in the industry. So just help them with that, push them in the right direction. I feel like that's the best thing you can do. But you shouldn't be looking for investment early on.
No, that's great. I'll get your view on this, and you'll understand this yourself. And for those who are either asking for investment or those who will provide investment, there'll be 1,000,001 different views. Some will say, hey, Mike, you're bang on the money. Hey, Mike, that's the wrong advice. Hey, Mike, I'd have gone somewhere down the middle. And that's fine. You can shoot me a message using the hashtag #TheOpenMic and I'll have a debate with you. But based on what I understand, I had a situation where somebody was looking for a leisure app, and it was for, that aggregates staff and industry and customers and connected, in the leisure sector. And their issue was, Mike, I don't have a dime to develop it. I'm messing about with some guys over in India with a bit of development. They're not doing it right. I've got to have the investment. And I hear what you say, but I've got to have the investment to even get to, minimum viable product. So what I said, we went through various discussions, and you understand I'm giving you a very condensed sort of version of it. But what I said to him, I said, well, what if you can't get that? Let's just say that there is nobody out there who's going to give you money to develop it. What's the options? I guess a seriously blank face. So I said, well, have you remortgaged your house? From that point, have you been a mum and dad? Is there a pension pot you can draw out of? Is there any, could you go to partnership with something? So we explored all the other things, but we hit a blank wall. No, we can't get the money, we can't get MVP. So what I said to him at the time, I said, well, look, why don't we graphic design the screen out on a slide deck, like a PowerPoint, and then we'd put some animation on it, like moving cursor or whatever, and you could physically animate the app out, as what the buyer's or the user's journey would be, and that could be done in PowerPoint, Google Slides, Apple, whatever it is. And that's the advice I gave to them, because ultimately, if they haven't got the money, nobody's prepared to do it, everything is, I don't know, have you come across that where people have sort of done like a mock-up animation using something like that to get that? How solid is, because I'm slightly out of touch with it. I'll be the first to sort of raise my hand. I don't do as much in the space that you're there now, but how out of date is that? Are you seeing investors say, hey, well, at least I get it, I understand it, if there's a bigger supporting, market assessment, if all the other work's done, but it's just the actual physical product, is that still a viable strategy, or is there a better solution?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is one of my big things. This is. I'm glad you asked, because this is one of my big things that I kind of preach to everybody. There are, there are solutions. So if you find a problem and you have an idea for a cool problem solution, right, and you want to pitch this, and you can't develop like an app, and it works best through an app, and you can't develop an app that makes this happen, right? There are other solutions. There are other things in the market that work this way, right? And if there aren't, I'm shocked. You have found an extremely rare industry, and I'm skeptical. Like the industry just generally is so saturated. The world is so full of products. There is going to be something out there that people are using currently to fix that problem in some way. Yeah. What you need to use is that solution and hack it. So here's an example. One of my friends over at CMU, he's working on a product right now. I love his story right now because he's building an application. It's an application to help hairdressers and stylists, freelance stylists find more clients, and it's cutting out the big barbershops and the style salons and everything like that, because they overcharge by like 800%. Seriously, like it's ridiculous. The amount of money that the actual stylist gets, super low compared to what the style organization rakes in. It's ridiculous. It's a very, very weird industry. So he's trying to cut out the middleman with that, and he's trying to make a platform to do that. Instead of building out the platform first, he was working on the platform. He can code great, so he has no problems with that. He doesn't have to find like investment or anything, because he can do it himself. That's awesome. I can't do that. What he did instead before that is he just hooked up a Typeform like application to a Calendly to schedule things, and he worked it through a basic Wix site. Like he hacked it together with a couple of existing applications, and he sold that to people. He said, here's this. I tied a couple of things together. It does essentially the same thing with just crappier UI. And he was able to sell that to people for a monthly subscription, and people paid for that because it solved the problem.
So it proves the concept that people are interested in it.
More than proves the concept, it proves that like there's value there, and that if you create something more robust, even more people would pay for it. Like you solve the problem any way that you can. And I know plenty of people like in their investigation that before they built an app, before they built anything like that, they realized there was an issue in accounting with workflow. Right, and so he went to these accounting groups and these accounting organizations with Asana. He went there with Trello. He went there with all these different kind of already existing things. And he said, this should work fine. Why doesn't it work? And it didn't work for certain reasons. So he hacked a couple of things. He was probably able to make like a Trello board using a couple of integrations and fancy things that they weren't thinking about that makes that happen. Because Trello and Slack and Asana have tons of integrations. And you can use Zapier. Zapier is a great resource, by the way. To hook a Google Sheet together for a makeshift database, to hook like a workflow tool like Trello together with a communication tool like Slack. There are so many different little things that you can do, usually free, that you can hack together just to make a very, very low fidelity prototype for what you're trying to do. And so
Amazing.
if you, Zapier is a great example. Any integrations, you can usually hack stuff together. And I think like programs like Google Sheets, there's things like Parabola. You can use like online courses like Teachable. There's a ton of resources out there to teach things, to illustrate things, to hold data, to use data, to move it in different ways. And that's a lot of the problems that need to be solved. So 99% of the time, there's going to be ways to solve it that you don't need to code anything. You just need to spend a little bit of time being creative with existing solutions.
Yeah, and that goes back from an investor's point of view as well, Max. So how much do you want it? And if you generally believe in your product and you're going to find a way, aren't you? Unless it's mission impossible, you are going to find a way. And I love the idea, and thanks for sharing it, because a lot of people say, oh no, before I go to the VCs, it's got to be just perfect and blah, 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 blah. No. And like I say, I love your analogy, crappy UI. If you prove the concept, what was that, Typeform and Google Sheets and a rubber band and a bit of sellotape or something?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Absolutely love it. So if you sat there, you're struggling, get creative. Just imagine there's no money in the world. There's nobody interested. They say, the cost of entry to coming back and pitching me is getting me something that works. What would you do? You either give up or you find a way. So go find a way and go make it happen. Great advice, Mark. Really appreciate that. So as we move through the rest of the questions, in today's economy, what advice would you give to somebody like a student like you was at the time, looking to get started as an entrepreneur? I know you did some interviews. Is that the core of it, or is there something else that's materialized since you've sort of left that sort of faculty area and come into entrepreneurship?
Number one thing that I would absolutely recommend is definitely reach out to people in the industry, even if it's not entrepreneurs. If you're a doctor, like if you're an aspiring med student, like go reach out to doctors at your local hospitals and say, can I interview you? Like just to get a better understanding, because most of the time, like university gives you a very specific view on an industry and how that job is going to function, and they really don't give you too much real world experience. Like doctors is different because you have to have real world experience to be effective there, and they're good with that. But almost everything else, you're getting very limited experience in terms of just because university is like that. It's an old kind of institution, and it's not teaching you things that are completely up to date. They're usually 10, 20 years behind. Even if they're great, like CMU, still 10, 20 years behind when it comes to a lot of marketing things. And they teach you general concepts, but not the real nitty gritty. So especially with entrepreneurship, go and reach out to people, especially if you're a student. Use your student email. People love it. And be really, really humble about it. Don't be like, I'm an aspiring entrepreneur. Be like, I don't know what's going on. Please help me. And people will respond. Like be super, super humble about it, and just accept that you know jack and that you need to learn things. So that's number one. Number two is probably, like I preach it all the time with my content. I wish there were more content sources out there. Start futzing with stuff, even if it messes up. Like I ran like 6 different projects that I could list off to you right now that went nowhere. But I learned about affiliate marketing. I learned about like digital marketing. I learned about how to build a website. I learned about like how to interact with customers. I learned how to do customer interviews. I learned stuff even though I screwed the whole thing up. And that gets you a really, really robust understanding on how it lowers the mental barrier to entry for starting something new. So now I can go on my streams. I can go on my streams and say like, you know what? I want to build a dog resource for the city of Pittsburgh, and I want to let everybody know like when the cool dog events are, because there's no aggregator for that kind of thing, right? There's Meetup and there's Facebook and there's all these different little RSS feeds that you can subscribe to. But how about I just collect all that into one simple email newsletter and see what people like? I know I can go on MailChimp right now and connect that to a little form on Wix and spend maybe like $30 overall with some marketing budget and advertise that to a couple people. I can do that in like 5 hours, and I can prototype that in a weekend. I can send that off and see if people like it. I can only do that because I've messed with those tools before. I know how they function, and I've lowered the mental barrier to entry for how much effort that takes because I know all the operations already. So second biggest piece of advice, futz around with Wix, futz around with Zapier, futz around with Google Sheets, futz around with websites, with ads, with email newsletters, with whatever it is, just for fun.
You're widening your skills there, aren't you? And
exactly.
Even if you wish to, I don't know, hold 5 or 10 or 15% of it, something like that, it's going to come in useful at some point, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And having like some experience, even if it's like 0.001% is more than zero, because now you at least have a mental model to go off of like, I know this is possible. That's the biggest barrier to entry for everything, because a whole lot is possible with existing tools out there. We just don't know it. So we need to experiment with those tools to figure that out.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about the humble side of approaching people. one of the biggest, there's sort of three main resources in my mind. And again, you guys may say there's something different, but for me, there's time. That's number one, because it's irreplaceable. There's energy, and then there's money, what comes a distant third. So, the humble part, if somebody came to me and said to you, hey, with that aggressive stance, or that clever stance, or that push. Yeah, I'm a big believer in altruism. I help a lot of people. I'm one of those few people who actually help people on LinkedIn. And I'm sure you'll have a lot of other people say, hey, Mike, I do that as well, where, your career advice. And, I actually jump on and say, hey, what are you trying to get to? And usually, by the way, if you're listening and you're thinking about asking somebody like me for career advice on LinkedIn, be specific. Don't just give me, hey, I'm a psychology student looking to get into entrepreneurship. What should I do?
Exactly.
Go back and work something out. Give me something to work with. But ultimately, just slightly off topic there, guys. Sorry, apologies. But the point I'm actually trying to get to here is I'm a big believer in helping people. You can shoot me a message. If you've got a question, if I can help you, I'll help you. If I can't, I'll point you and signpost you the right way. But the ones who come and as if it's an automatic, you should give me all the things, and they've not done anything. I will, even me, who's very, 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 generous with my time to help people, get people on the road. Because, I've been where you've been, Max, right at the beginning of, well, you're not quite there, but before, right at the end of the journey, and, at the early stages, at the maturity stages, and everywhere in between. And I know how hard it is. And so be humble. That's the thing. And how would you suggest that email, that first, whether it's a message or an email, what would that email look like, Max, if you were to sort of, manually, verbally type it out? So would it be, hey, Mike, would you break it up? Would you wax their ego a bit like, hey, I've seen you super successful in the industry. Here's my position. I'm no crap. Could you help me with this? Or would you have a different approach to it? How would you scope that email out? So people listening, ready to record, or they're going to rewind this podcast or rewind the blog, how would you break that email or first message out to get the best response?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've written a couple of posts on this. I'm super big on this, so I'm glad you asked. The biggest thing is, if you're a student, of course, again, use that. It's huge. Start it off with, hello, Mike, I am a student at blah, 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 studying entrepreneurship or studying whatever it is. That's the biggest thing. If you can't do that, so be it. That's fine. Just introduce yourself as I'm interested in this, blah, blah, blah. But the biggest things to include in the email is like the way that I would phrase it is hey, Mike, my name is Max. I'm a student, or I'm a recent grad of CMU in Pittsburgh, and I'm super interested in the entrepreneurial field. I wanted to get in touch with you because I've seen a lot of your content, or I was doing research into your company, and I noticed that you have a lot of experience in this industry, and I'm personally trying to get my start there. I genuinely have no idea how to get started, but I do have lots and lots of questions. And if you were open for 30 minutes to either hop on a call or meet for coffee completely at your convenience, I would really, really appreciate the opportunity. That's how I would phrase it generally. Small amount of flattery. Be honest with it. It's super, super flat. I hate flattery personally. If people reach out to me and they give me 5 compliments in an email, yeah, I tune right the heck out, because it's super obvious when it becomes ingenuine and people are just doing it to get your attention. The best thing you can do is just something small. Keep it genuine. Don't make it a cookie cutter email. If you have a template, you need to change 3 sentences in that template every time, because it becomes really obvious to the mental psyche of this could apply to anybody. If it's a really hyper specific email, you're awesome with the Success Hub, and the reasons that I like the Success Hub is because this, and this, and they're all very very, very closely related.
You're going to get a better connectivity.
Exactly. You're going to get so much better connectivity, because it very much shows that you are reaching out independently, individually to this person, because you care about specifically their advice.
Amazing advice. That's a great block down. If you've got a blog post as well on that or anything, Max, just send me a link to it. I'll put it on the show notes as well if you've got anything like that. And again, if you want some more advice on Max, just hit Max up on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Max Mirho, and that's MAXMIRHO. But that's awesome advice. And, because, different stages, different businesses, different levels, different countries, different cultures, it's always good to get a different, view on how to do that. And yeah, the flattery, I always say, use it like a pinch of salt, as you would in cooking. You wouldn't never just you just wouldn't pour the salt into the pasta, at half a tub. You just give it a little tweak, acknowledge it, respect them while you're reaching out, and then go from there. That's awesome advice.
Completely agree. Yeah.
So why is it so important, Max, for startups to be involved with the community? We touched on it right at the beginning of the top of the show, but let's delve a little bit deeper into that importance of startups being involved in these communities.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's shockingly important to have a network as an entrepreneur. And like, I am not a product entrepreneur. I'm building a business. Moss Generation is a business. Yay. It's not a startup. It has the potential to scale to other cities. Yay. But I am not a product entrepreneur by any means. I don't have some fancy investable tech startup that I'm working on. So take my advice with a grain of salt. But from what I've seen, I've worked with over 100 startups and over 100 founders because I run this company. And from what I've seen, having that network of other founders is super, super awesome, because the reason that our events are so successful is because when they come, they are dealing with other people, other founders that have exactly the same issues. They're insane, like the same early stage. They're all dealing with traction problems. They all have like people in the pipeline that won't like commit to an actual deal. Like what's the issue with that? If they're in B2C and they're doing hardware, like there are certain issues with manufacturing. How are you sourcing your manufacturing? How are you doing your shipping? What does your like customer fulfillment look like? Like there are similar issues that you all run through, and getting that advice from other people dealing with even remotely similar crap is really, really helpful. And also from a mental point of view, like if you're a doctor, you like to hang out with other doctors and talk about how stressed you are about like, oh geez, like clinical's killing me today. But like if you're, and the same thing applies. Like if you're an entrepreneur, it's hard to find other entrepreneurs to just like yell about your problems with. So it's helpful from a mental perspective, helps with burnout. It's helpful from like an actual business building perspective, because like I know people that are hiring right now for their startup, and before other startups raise their next round of funding in town, they want advice from that startup on how the heck to find employees in a very like small little ecosystem like Pittsburgh. Like how do you get people to move here? How do you do that? Like I know like some of the larger startups in town are great at it, but how are you doing it? You're at that perfect stage. That's really awesome advice to share. Really, really great. It's hard to build that network. That's why we're doing it with Moss Generation. But generally, like, you can ask for investor introductions. If you're both selling to insurance agencies, you can ask for introductions to higher level managers and insurance agencies from startups that have made that contact before, but it might be difficult for you to. You can ask for mentors. You can, in terms of introductions, in terms of sharing networks, it's super important because you're all trying to reach out to very similar people in terms of customers, investment, mentorship, whatever it may be. But you don't have to do all that yourself. You can lean on other people's advice.
And there's a good chance as well that if you're right up against the glass with a problem, that community is probably going to fix that, or somebody in that community may have solved that problem, and they can help not shortcut by an undercutting by trying to cheat, but if that can save you 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 12 weeks or 12 months of development, wow, what's that worth to you to get your product to market faster, make that MVP, stop getting rejected with obvious errors with a funder, or even wasting your own money. And they do help that way, because, ultimately say, hey, I came across that problem. We use, product X or service Y, or we figured it out by doing this.
Exactly.
And that you cannot put a price on that, because that gets your app launched. I'm not talking about Uber or anything like that, but if that gets that app or that tech launched, whereas otherwise it wouldn't have done, because you're stuck in the mode, you're spinning your wheels, and somebody else figures that out before you. They may be first to market, they may capitalize on it, and you may be sat, who's the guy out there who was the second Facebook, or the second Uber? Now I know Lyft to Uber is pretty successful, but ultimately, there's a lot of businesses that miss that opportunity and never get to monetize it because they weren't first to market, or they just didn't boss it. So the community and that advice. One thing you touched on, Max, I really want to sort of get your take on it, and not superficial. Let's go down a couple of levels here. The importance of mentorship, the importance of, that mastermind, we call them over in the UK non-exec directors or coaches or whatever you would be. And I'm not just sort of talking about paid coaching, but how important is that inside of the community? Do you have like a resident coach? Is that what you're taking on, the role of, mentor to these people and the members, or are you bringing external mentors in to sort of for specialist areas? I'd just love to get your feel for. So if somebody's looking to start a similar type of organization, should they be having a mentor in residence, a panel, remote, on site? I don't know. What's your view around the mentorship and this?
Totally. Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So I'm still trying to figure that out, but from what I've seen, mentorship in Pittsburgh is crappy. It's really, really crappy just because we circulate a lot of the same mentors, and they're great people, but because we're a small ecosystem when it comes to entrepreneurs in residence, when it comes to like manufacturers in residence, or people that have experience in certain fields, like they are circulated very generally, and some of them don't have some of the like best experience. Like they built a company maybe 20 years ago, and those are the people, like, just because they're in with some of the investment organizations or in with some of the accelerators, they're circulated a lot. So it's a problem in Pittsburgh. That's why we're trying to build a larger network for people outside of Pittsburgh to come in, give advice. But generally, from what I've seen, coaching, things like that, in terms of startups, isn't that common. And if you have a mentor, it's usually somebody in a very, very hyper-specific, really, really similar field that you're building in. So if I'm building, like I know a company in town called Subtle Beauty, and I know the founder really, really. Her name's Rachel. If she's going to find a mentor, and I think she does have some mentors, her mentors are going to be in the space of cosmetics. Yeah. Somebody that's built a really successful cosmetics brand before, or somebody that understands the manufacturing when it comes to B2C products, with that like commodity B2C products, or anybody that has like actual real experience recently in the past 3 to 5 years in building a company that's extremely hyper similar to the one that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
That is when mentorship is really awesome, because you're dealing with the exact same issues in that scenario, and they can give really, really great advice on that. Other than that, if you have a small problem with manufacturing or customer fulfillment, you're going to go to one of the guys in your local network that has dealt with that kind of crap before. And you're going to say, hey, how did you deal with this problem? You're going to shoot him an email. That's the best thing you can do. If you know somebody that has a lot of issues hiring in terms of like freelancers, and they don't know how to, like, and you know somebody really that has really effectively used Upwork before, and you're going to go call them and you'll be like, hey, what is your advice for finding a great freelancer on Upwork? You can get little tidbits of information from most of your network, and that's why having a network is important, like you're saying, these little hacks. But beyond that, mentorship is for entrepreneurs is really only going to be awesome and effective if it's somebody literally that did the same thing that you're going to be doing or you're trying to do, and they're really passionate about that and they want to help you, right? Hopefully they're an investor, because if they made a successful company before, it'd be great to have them as an angel, because then they can sit on the board. That's great. But beyond that, you want to find somebody doing the exact same stuff.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well done. Well said. Thank you. So as we start to wrap out on the question side, Mark, so the need to get noticed, as we know, is essential. If we don't have a brand out there, or we're not allowed, we don't exist. I get that. So in your perspective, how are you seeing this working? You know, obvious question, but where does marketing fit into starting a company? Not like, hey, I'm now ready to go, but when you're right at the beginning, where does marketing fit in there?
Absolutely, yeah. So the way that marketing kind of fits into all this is like being able to run an ad and having, like, the biggest tool that I can say is, yes, Wix is awesome, Zapier, I'm preaching all these different little things. The biggest thing that I would probably check out is just like Instagram and Facebook ads. Like, go on the Business Manager, check it out. If you haven't done it before, please take a peek at it, because whatever you are starting in, even if it is to businesses, even if it is to governments, even if you are selling to basic consumers, whoever it is, to college students, like, being able to spend $20 for a day and publish some little thing that has information just to push a little bit of traffic to some landing page you made, it is the only way to get started, because otherwise you are reaching out to people that have, like, you're reaching out to your friends, you're putting flyers up, like, that's marketing too. But like, just being able to understand small little pokes, and even like cost-effective little pokes to get some traffic to what you're doing. Biggest thing because otherwise you're not getting customer interaction. Otherwise you're not testing your actual product. Then you're just working off an idea of what you think people will like, which is never right. I don't care how smart you are. So just being able to push a little bit of traffic through SEO, through AdWords, through Google ads or Facebook ads or LinkedIn ads, or just like publishing around it, on having an audience on some social platform, whatever it is, little marketing tactics like that. And again, most basic, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, best way to get started pushing people to your idea, to get it tested, to get it see if you have market traction, see what people think of it.
That's great. What's your view on this? And this is something that I speak to my team about, because, you know, obviously as our agency head, I'm a little bit older than you guys. And there's, we've got a lot of young creative people in. And like, for example, my daughter, she's got a university, she's studying sports science and sports physiotherapy and, with professional sports clubs, football and things like that. And I said to her, she's got her own domain, ellemidgley.com and things like that. And what I said to her is start a blog. Right at the beginning, start a blog. Purely and simply is because I look back in 1994, what's a blog? Okay, I'm sure you got some old guys saying, hey, they were out there, but hey, not in the mainstream. And I think about all the lessons that I've learned. To a degree, I make a living as well. One of my channels is exec coaching, and I make a living out of producing content around my 25 years of being an entrepreneur, whether that's for finance, operations, people, sales, marketing, whatever it would be. But wouldn't it have been great to create content and experiences and blogs? Here's a quick stat for you, Max. I get your view on this to see if you think this is worthwhile. I think it is. I don't mind if we disagree. It's all about opinion and debate and things like that. But I said to you, you're going to do a 3-year course. If you wrote 2 blogs a week about your experiences at college, you're at college 3.5 days plus whatever. If you wrote 2 blogs a week, so if you look in mean average, that's 104 blogs, right? A year, mean average, So if you take that times 3, that's 312 blogs about the subject of sports science and things like that. By the time she graduates, can you imagine having 312 blogs ranking SEO? She automatically enters into the entrepreneurial world as a physio and a sports scientist with a massive set of content. And the earlier stuff will be a bit rough, the middle stuff will be a bit better, and the end will be there. Can you imagine how much she's going to rank by the time she comes to wanting to become revenue generating there? So that's a bit of tip I'm giving my younger mentor, the advice I'm giving. Even if you go and become an auto mechanic, if you're an auto mechanic working with your hands, you're a farmer working with your hands, picking fresh fruit and vegetables with your hands. If you're into more service related or tech, it doesn't matter. Whatever you start on that journey, write 2 blogs a week about it. And then, there's a great tip with Marcus Sheridan, a sales line, the big 5, how to, reviews, pricing. Just answer the questions, write blogs. Can you imagine how much traffic that would boss if it's done right? And that's what I'm saying to people. Are you seeing people doing that in startups? Should they be doing it? Is that right, wrong, indifferent? Have you got a different strategy for organic?
So I completely agree with you. The only thing that you're 100% right. You're absolutely 100% right. So one thing that Gary Vee does preach that's really nice is document the journey, right? That is super important. And I think a lot of other people, it's not just him, everybody kind of recommends what you're saying. And I completely 100% agree with it. That's the entire reason that I'm doing Entrepreneurship. I think, so in terms of blogs are awesome. They're a little bit older in terms of a content form, right? And it's a lot of stuff to write. It's really, really a big pain in the butt. If you spent the same amount, if you could spend half the time writing a social media post like twice a week, right? Or 4 times a week, you could probably spend the same amount of time doing two social media posts for every 1 blog post instead. Blog posts are great for SEO. SEO scales, but it's hard to build a following around that, right? Yeah. Unless you that's why social channels are awesome. So blog would be amazing. Having that content in the back is incredible, absolutely incredible, unbelievably useful in terms of having thought leadership, in terms of finding customers, in terms of getting help, mentorship, investment too. Everything that you're doing and everything content production overall generally best time investment anybody they can make, period. Yeah. If that's a blog, awesome. If you prefer that kind of long form content, great, super support it. I personally have chosen the path of using LinkedIn, and I'm hopefully trying to build an audience on Instagram a little bit. It's harder to do it organically on Instagram, yes. But LinkedIn, really easy to do it organically right now. I have a follower base of around 5,300 people over the past year that I've built just because I've published the issues and the crap that I'm dealing with and the things that I've thought about and what people have asked me with my very limited experience, but what I'm able to give advice on. That kind of stuff is the only reason that I built a following, because people care about that. And having that audience has been unbelievably helpful to me in everything that I'm doing. It has helped me find more.
And podcasting as well, of course. So that's obviously it's coming more and more and more and more. We did a stat about 6 weeks ago, so it might be out of date, Max. But this time in June, in fact, it was June, so it is 6-8 weeks ago. In June 2018, there's over 550,000 podcasts on Apple. In June 2019, there's nearly, I think, 750 or 760 or something. So podcasts have got 200,000 podcasts in the last 12 months registered on there as well. So whether it's blog, you write, long form, whether it's social, whether it's podcasting, whether it's LinkedIn, but it's about documenting that journey, getting it out there and providing value. So pick your niche. You know your audience. Do they hang out here? Do they hang out there? Do they prefer the long read? Is it a YouTube following? Although I do agree with you 100%, Max, about it being very saturated out there on their channel. So just go out there and do that and find out what works, find out what your audience likes, and whatever it is. It may be a blend. It might be a blog and a podcast a week, or a blog, a podcast, or it may just be social media and build it up that way and drop a group in, whether that's in LinkedIn, Facebook, or whatever it would be. So that's awesome. And Mark, that's tremendous. Any other marketing tips, that bit of paid traffic sort of stuff, any other little hacks that you've got out there that you could sort of say, this worked for us, or in the Pittsburgh area, this is good, or in the MarTech space or whatever?
I think probably the last little bit. I can't give any too many like general marketing tips. Like the best thing that I would say is just screw around with stuff and then spend like $5 here, $5 there. Like dedicate like a budget of $60 just to mess with different ads for whatever you're working on. That's great. A/B test, woohoo. There's way more marketing. There's a lot of really, really awesome marketing information out there. I suggest you go look at it. The biggest thing, though, that in terms of marketing is use Facebook and Instagram ads or LinkedIn ads to help build that little bit of a following. So if you're starting a blog, run a couple of ads on your blog. Yeah. Spend $5 for like a day and just like test, make a little selfie video that says, "Hey, my name is Max. I really like entrepreneurship and I call myself the entrepreneur. I make videos or I make blog posts about this. Like I hope I try to do it every week. It'd be awesome if you followed along with me. And here's the link. You can swipe up to check out the link." Just try little things like that to start that initial boom of an audience. Because there's nothing more helpful. Even if your product is you, like having a personal brand with that content, it's still the best thing you can have is customers. So the best thing you can get is people to talk to you, give you feedback. So, yeah.
Max, that's absolutely amazing. And as I say, I used the phraseology earlier, a white head on young shoulders, and you make a lot of sense in a lot of areas. So congratulations on your journey so far. It's refreshing in today's economy. I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, but they're not focused, or they'll be playing at it. And I'm not talking about playing around like you're saying here, but play about it. Oh, it's hard work and I'm giving up and I was going to, I sometimes give up with the younger generation, if I'm being honest. A little bit
I do too.
Because they're lazy, they're playing on Xboxes. Hey, Xbox, PlayStation, Atari, VCS, whatever you're playing these days, doesn't really make a difference. And we all need some downtime, I get that. But they're lazy, they're not prepared to put the hard yards in. And, for me, when I was bringing up, I had to put the hard yards in because I didn't have the supportive family, I didn't have the internet, I didn't have any money, all those things. And that didn't stop me. I got myself out there, just chewed through concrete blocks to get to, some type of, support. So amazing. And as I say, I'm super excited and privileged to, interview you today. Thanks for sharing your content. If you want to pick up more on Max, check out him on Twitter, the Entrepreneur with a hyphen between, underscore between E and N. I'll get that posted and put the links below. Max's preferred channel is LinkedIn, so linkedin.com/IN/Max Mirho. That's MAXMIRHO. If you are in around the Pittsburgh area, you can go to mossgeneration.com and you can see what Max is doing out there. So as we wrap, Max, I usually ask guests and influencers just to sort of summarize when we're talking about small form entrepreneurship and how marketing fits into that. What would be 3 pro tips you would be offering the listeners right now to sort of, get them off the couch, get them into this, and, 3 essential things that they should be doing to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing that gets people moving, the biggest thing, even if you're a lazy individual, even if you I'm lazy, I will sit at home and do nothing, even if I have a ton of work on my plate. The biggest thing that gets me going is traction, though. And so the biggest thing is you got to get started with traction. So the tips to get started with traction, because traction is addicting. Once you get a little bit of success, you start to learn something, you get really hype on that, and that keeps you moving. So the first thing is go out and talk to people. Like go out and interview people in your industry, not customers, but entrepreneurs in your industry that are doing cool things, and ask them how they built their company and figure out the right questions to build that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is experiment with projects. So experiment with little integrations. If you have an idea and you can tie together a couple of little things, like learn the integratable different resources and tools on the internet. Learn workflow tools, learn communication tools, learn how to integrate them with databases, how to build websites and how to connect all that, learn how to do email newsletters, email forms, like sign up forms for different things, learn how to run these different little kinds of campaigns to build audiences, just futz and learn how all these different tools, these free, don't spend money, free tools function. Use the freemium model, like just don't pay for anything, just futz. That's definitely number 2, learn everything that's out there so you have a baseline for experimenting when you have like an idea that you want to work on. And then number 3 is learn how to push basic, stupid, simple ads to those. So whether that's content, building an audience online, whether that's running an ad on a niche social, like running a Reddit ad, like whatever the heck it is, there are so many different opportunities for basic little forms of marketing. You can look up lists of different things that you can do for marketing on the internet. I wish I had a good one to suggest to you, but just mess around with Facebook and Instagram ads to start and see if you can push $5 for a day just to see what happens. Make a little free landing page with something online, advertise a fake product, I don't care if it's real, and say, we're currently building this thing. You don't have to be truthful. Like I'm building, I made a joke recently. I'm building a hat made out of ice, so you can cool your head when it's hot in the summer, or like it's a hat that you would put in the freezer. Like it looks like a normal baseball cap, but it has like an ice pack on it. Make a freaking landing page for that, and like draw some fake mock-ups on Google, like just like some little piece of paper, and put that on a landing page. Run $5 ads to it, see what happens. That is the best possible experience.
The data doesn't lie, does it? It gives you a good feel of what's going to go out there.
Exactly, and that gives you a baseline for every other form of experimentation when it comes to small form entrepreneurship, and even when it comes to startups. Like you get a much better baseline for experimentation and how to get from 0 to 0.001. That's the biggest step. So
yeah, we've got a saying, version 1's better than version none, and however you get there, and like you say, there is so many tools, and if you hear the F2P, free to play sort of model, or the freemium model, okay, it's not going to have all the features of the paid plans, but it'll get you started and it'll get you hacking around and things like that. So Mark, it's been tremendous value. Thanks ever so much for sharing your journey. Continued success. We wish you all every success with Moss Generation, the entrepreneurial journey. Let's keep checking in. And I know Max is going to do a bit of exclusive content for us in our Growth Engine community as well, where he's going to do a little training session and bits and bobs coming after the production of the show. So you get to see a little bit more of Max's talents in the community from that side. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, Max, and I appreciate you taking your time out of a busy day at Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. And thanks once again for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was tons of fun.
Fantastic. So whatever you're doing, whatever size you're at, small form entrepreneurship, getting off the couch, getting started, go put the effort in. And as always, we appreciate you continuing growth engine development to get in the game, go do the hustle, go make it happen. And we're going to catch up with you on another Open Mic podcast real soon.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.